Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. I'm pleased to be joined this afternoon with Commissioner Bratton, Chief of Department James O'Neill, and Chief Tom Pertell of Organized Crime Control Bureau, and the members of the NYPD Firearms Unit, and of course the Mayor of the City of New York. Also with me are Assistant District Attorneys to my left, Megan Haast, Christopher Ryan, who's Chief of the Violent Criminal Enterprises Unit, and Chief Assistant District Attorney Karen Friedman Agdifilo. Today we're announcing the latest efforts in our work to stem the tide of illegal weapons that continues, unfortunately, to wash over the streets of New York, despite our state's enactment of some of the strongest gun laws in the nation. Today's cases, represented by the firearms you see here, represent the 20th and 21st gun trafficking indictment brought by our office and its Violent Criminal Enterprises Unit, which we formed in 2010. With the guns on the table in front of me, this unit alone, but in partnership with the NYPD, have now recovered more than 1,000 illegal firearms from the streets of New York and put 64 traffickers out of business. And that is in addition to the more than 2,000 guns recovered by other units in our office since 2010. Today, in the indictments that have been unsealed, we're charging 6 individuals for their role in a conspiracy to sell more than 70 illegal firearms to an undercover detective over the course of 35 sales in Harlem and 7 sales in the Bronx. In total, those 6 defendants are charged with 147 felony counts, including conspiracy, criminal sale of a firearm, and criminal possession of a weapon. 2 of the 6 are charged with criminal sale of a firearm in the first degree, which is a Class B violent felony, carrying a potential maximum sentence of 25 years in prison. The charges follow a proactive joint investigation by our Violent Criminal Enterprises Unit and the NYPD Firearms Investigation Unit, employing undercover gun buys, video surveillance and recording, and other investigative techniques. As alleged in this indictment, Samuel Barretto sold 39 firearms to an undercover detective, including 6 semi-automatic assault weapons. He also acted as a broker of firearms, referring the detective to 5 other individuals, and who became defendants in this case. Carl Smalls, who sold the detective 37 firearms, Michael Akpan and Trayvon Smith, who each sold 4 firearms, Keith Hughes, who sold 2 firearms, and Michael Rivera, who sold 1. Each of the buys took place in residential neighborhoods in broad daylight, with 2 of the final sales taking place on East 102nd Street, near the site of violence which culminated in the death of police officer Randolph last week. The weapons recovered as a result of this investigation are obviously displayed in front of me and before you, and they include 65 revolvers and pistols, 7 semi-automatic assault weapons, a rifle, a shotgun, and many others. At least 59 of the guns were loaded when purchased. Some of the firearms recovered are among the most dangerous weapons available today, including a Norinco assault rifle. The undercover also purchased hundreds of rounds of ammunition, which the defendants in this case referred to as food for the weapons, including hollow point bullets and extended magazine for use in the semi-automatic weapon. Now, these 6 defendants have been taken into custody over the past 24 hours, and they will be arraigned later today in Part 93 on the 15th floor of 100 Center Street. In a second case we're announcing today, Jacqueline Griffin is charged with selling 15 guns to a different undercover detective in and around Morningside Park in West Harlem over the course of 9 months. Griffin, like the 6 defendants in their first case, is charged with various counts of criminal sale and criminal possession. He was arrested by the NYPD Firearms Investigation Unit on October 7 and is being held on $350,000 bond currently. Our office and our partners at the NYPD are going to continue to do everything that we can in our power to eradicate gun violence that continues to linger in certain pockets of Manhattan. Because despite historic gains in our fight against crime, illegal firearms, as you all know, still claim the lives of too many New Yorkers, from victims of domestic violence to victims of gang violence to police officers who ran toward, not away from, the gunfire. And our office, like the NYPD, will not treat gun violence this way anymore as seriously as we possibly can. And I know that seriousness is also reflected in the efforts of my colleagues in the Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens, and the Bronx. But the fact of the matter is that prosecutors and police officers can't deal with gun violence alone. We cannot prosecute our way out of this issue. We suspect that most of the 89 guns procured from today's traffickers, like every other illegal firearm or nearly every other firearm in the streets of New York, comes from out of state. It's a fact that more than 8,500 firearms were recovered and traced out of New York State in 2013, according to the ATF. And of those, nearly 70% came from out of state, with 331 guns coming from Georgia. We believe that the overwhelming majority of the guns used to shoot 37 people in the 23rd and 25th precincts in East Harlem this year, 7 fatally, came from out of state. And we know that the guns used to murder detectives Winjan Liu, Rafael Ramos, Brian Moore, and police officer Randolph Holder came from out of state. Later this week, I'm going to Portland for a summit of prosecutors against gun violence, which is a nonpartisan group that I and the LA County City Attorney have formed, bringing together 35 prosecutors from major cities around the country. And we didn't form this Prosecutors Against Gun Violence group to fight an ideological war. We formed it because prosecutors now have decades of hand-on experience about local strategies that have been successful and community partnerships that have been successful to reclaim our communities from gun violence, and we want to share and we want to implement those strategies nationwide. But as I said, prosecutors alone are not going to solve this problem, not with an iron pipeline pumping handguns, AK-47s, and other military-style assault weapons onto our streets and into the hands of our children. The most fundamental responsibility that law enforcement has is to protect the safety of its citizens. My office and our partners intend to keep that promise. What we need now, desperately, is leadership in Congress to join us. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for having us here today, and I'm now going to turn this over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Si. I want to thank District Attorney Vance and his office for the collaboration on not only this case, but on the continuing efforts to deal with the crime situation in the city. It's significantly reduced as it's been over the last 20-some-odd years. The issue of gun violence remains still one of the more significant issues that we have to face. I'm joined at the podium by the mayor, who will speak in just a moment, Mayor Bill de Blasio. But I also want to acknowledge the Chief of Department, Jim O'Neill, Chief of Organized Crime Control Bureau, Tommy Patel, District Deputy Inspector Brian Gill, and Captain Robin Van Houten of our firearms unit that were involved in this investigation. There's undercover officers are also involved who understandably cannot be here, but they're the ones that do the lion's share of the dangerous work trying to get these guns off the street. Number of firearms seized in this case, 74 of them that are displayed in front of you, are just another example of the easy availability of guns that eventually find their way to the streets of New York City. Too many areas of our city, including East Harlem, where a number of these guns were sold. These guns were not purchased in large blocks from a single source. They bought from 6 individuals over a one-year period. 6 people who are known within very local criminal circles as being involved in selling illegal guns. That says a lot about the problem of illegal guns in New York City. The issue of legal firearms in the city, as well as other parts of the country, has been around for years. Indeed, I'm just back this morning from the IACP Major City Chiefs Conference in Chicago, where my colleagues and I spent quite a bit of our time talking about the issue of gun violence. Many cities have seen incredible surges in violence related to firearms. This year, I had a private meeting with the head of the FBI, Director Comey, and he also spoke at all 3 conferences while I was there. And the focus of his attention was also on this issue that you see displayed before you, illegal guns and the impact they're having not only in New York City but around the country. As many law enforcement officers can attest, guns have traditionally been a sidebar to other illegal activity. Drug dealers often seek them to protect their turf. Organized crime members use firearms in furtherance of their criminal enterprises. But today it seems as though illegal firearms have become a commodity unto themselves, a very profitable commodity. Over 70 firearms of all types, from a .22 caliber revolver to an AK-47 assault rifle, both of which you'll see on these tables, were sold for a total of more than $50,000. Given the original cost of these weapons, many of which come from down south, if purchased down there, it is pretty clear that there's a good profit margin in gun trafficking. That's why there are unfortunately so many that engage in it. The NYPD, along with the assistance, the very, very able and aggressive assistance of our local prosecutors, as reflected in this case with Cy Vance and his office, continues to chip away at this problem. But the reality is that unless this problem is attacked at the source, in those jurisdictions lacking appropriate controls, these weapons will continue to find their way to New York City and the rest of our country, something that was discussed endlessly over these last several days in Chicago. There's a reason why the path to New York for legal guns is called a pipeline, the iron pipeline that you hear us refer to. And that iron pipeline, really, we need to continue our efforts to try to shut it down. But another reality is that just like any other commodity, illegal firearms are influenced by the principle of supply and demand. On the supply side, stricter gun laws and regulations are needed, particularly in those jurisdictions from which these firearms find their way to New York City. President Obama, who is scheduled to speak, I think as we're speaking to you, I believe he's on the stage in Chicago addressing the chiefs, that one of the issues I believe he is addressing is just this issue which we are discussing here. However, curtailing the supply alone cannot effectively impact all of the issues of gun violence in our communities. The demand side also needs to be addressed. There needs to be serious consequences to illegal gun possession and associated violence. Individuals involved in this type of activity must know that they will face certain and long incarceration. There must be no deals for gun offenders. Use of an illegal firearm in New York City should be considered a deal breaker. I want to commend the members of the Firearms Investigations Unit for their hard, thorough, and very dangerous work, particularly the undercovers, in developing this case and bringing it to a successful conclusion. And I certainly thank District Attorney Cy Vance and his staff for their continued commitment to dealing with the problem. I also want to thank, as I introduce him, the Mayor, for the continuing support of these efforts, as evidenced by the increase in the size of the department that we're experiencing, the additional thousands of officers that will have able to put out into the streets, as well as equipping our officers with the necessary equipment to go forth to face the dangers that they have to face. Mr. Mayor, thank you for your continued support, and sure, you're on.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you. Well, Commissioner and District Attorney, I want to commend you and thank you. Thank your teams for the extraordinarily good work done here. I know this is difficult work putting together these cases, but I want to say to my fellow New Yorkers, look at what this work has yielded. The work of the District Attorney's Office, NYPD, getting all these dangerous weapons off our streets. Painstaking work, difficult work, but absolutely necessary and worthwhile. So I commend both of you and your teams for what you've achieved. It's clear that we would not be standing here except for the extraordinary collaboration between the District Attorney's Office and the NYPD. And one thing that we all have to appreciate about Commissioner Bratton, he is one of the great innovators in policing, and he has talked consistently about what can be achieved when different agencies actually work together and what kind of results we can get from teamwork. This is an example of it. Under his leadership, that teamwork with prosecutors all over the city has deepened. I want to commend all the men and women of the NYPD and of the District Attorney's Office who took part in this effort. As you heard, some of them you will never get to meet, and their identities have to be protected, but we thank them. We know the work is not easy. We know it's dangerous, but what they have done is undoubtedly saved the lives of their fellow New Yorkers. Now, we want to be very clear. This is one set of arrests, one victory. There's going to be more because this work will deepen. So the message to anyone trafficking in illegal guns is the full force of the NYPD, the full force of the District Attorney's offices will come down on you. We are going to increasingly find those who are trafficking in illegal guns. And if you look at just what's been achieved here, 70 plus weapons, and the impact of this extraordinary operation, others who think they can get away with it will find just how good the NYPD is and just how good the District Attorney's offices are, and many more guns will come off the street. We believe in supporting this work fundamentally. As the Commissioner said, we're adding the resources to allow the NYPD to do more and more work to undercut illegal guns. It means more officers, it means more training, it means more technology. Some of the things that we've put into place, the new equipment available to our officers, the smartphones, the tablets in the patrol cars, technologies like Spot Shotter, all are going to help in the effort to track down illegal guns. All will make a difference. And there's been a focused effort in 17 precincts in particular to reduce gun violence, 17 precincts where we've had higher levels of shootings, and those focused efforts are having a very positive impact. We're proud of the fact that as we address in a focused fashion, again, this is part of the signature of Commissioner Bratton, the focused strategic efforts where the need is greatest. That goes back to what he started with Comstat. We're doing it now to address gun violence, and it's working. We are having this conversation against a very, very painful backdrop. We are all feeling the loss of Officer Holder. It is something I'm talking to people all over the city who are feeling a sense of mourning that we've lost such a good man, and he died protecting all of us. What adds to the pain of that loss is that these guns are so available, and that it is a national problem, because as the district attorney said, this is a state blessed to have strong regulations on firearms. This is a city blessed to have the finest police force in the entire country. The state and the city are doing a lot of the right things, and yet we find ourselves constantly challenged by the massive flow of guns from around the rest of the country and from the lack of any meaningful regulation nationally. We have to put this in perspective. We talk about the iron pipeline. We've seen the human consequence of the iron pipeline. We've lost police officers, we've lost parents, we've lost children, because somehow this country still tolerates the notion of the free flow of guns. And we know for a fact the gun that killed Officer Holder originated in South Carolina. We keep seeing this pathway illustrated over and over again. Gun from South Carolina kills one of our finest here on our streets. I don't have the illusion of saying today, because it should end, it will end easily. But I want to commend the district attorney for what he's doing with prosecutors, because this is one of the ways that things will change. The voices of prosecutors raising up around the country saying we can't continue this way. The voice of police leaders. There's more of a consensus than ever before. And it should not take another death of a police officer to change our policies, or another horrible campus massacre to change our policies. We have to call for change now. And I know, again, people look at the current political environment in Washington and think it's impossible. We've seen some stirrings on some other fronts lately, some beginnings of bipartisanship. I know this is a tough issue, but we have to call for the change to protect our people, to protect our communities, protect our police officers alike. I want to remind everyone, if we don't make these changes, who will get these guns? Hardened criminals, people with mental illnesses, people who are a threat to themselves and others. It's as simple as that, and more families will be torn apart. So I just want to thank Commissioner, the District Attorney, for what they've achieved today. I want to thank them in the name of all the people who will be safer because these guns are off the streets. I want to assure you we will expend every effort to get a lot more guns off the streets, and we won't stop fighting until we have the bigger changes we need in our country. Thank you.
We have time for some on-topic questions from the Commissioner.
The back.
Are you looking into, or at this point, is there any evidence that these suspects may have sold, the suspect in the shooting, that weapon he used, that .40 caliber? Could this have come from that group, this group?
Is the question that the firearm that he had, would it have been from these dealers? Is that the question?
Yeah, I know it came from out of state, how
We-
it got here and how it may have.
The matter of the investigation of that individual and how he came to acquire the firearm, that's right now in the grand jury, if I'm not mistaken, Si, so really can't speak to any of the specifics of that case in this venue at the moment.
Commissioner, could you describe the tactics or methods that the officers used to get these guns off the streets? Were they undercover buys? Was it surveillance?
These were undercover buys that we've got an extraordinary group of young men and women that, and not some not so young, that are out there every day. And they're the ones that should actually be standing up here. We're telling their story, but they're the ones that really put themselves in harm's way every day. And we cannot applaud enough the work that they do, getting these 74 guns off the street rather than into the hands of individuals that unfortunately show no qualms about using them.
Do you think that
the guns get into the hands of people in the city in many ways that sold like this. Community guns, some of the gangs use community guns where they pass the guns around. The case you're referencing in Brooklyn yesterday, that as that case goes forward, one of the things we will certainly try to do is ascertain where the firearm used in that incident, where that came from. They come from a wide variety of sources, but the point is the bulk of what we see in New York, weapons coming illegally into the city from other areas of the country and principally from the south. Yes.
Commissioner, in regards to gun trafficking, as you said, gun trafficking and drugs went hand in hand. What do you think about the 6,000 inmates that are being released on drug charges?
I'm sorry,
What do you think about the 6,000 inmates that are being released in the next 2 weeks?
The Oklahoma plan.
That were convicted on drug charges. What do you think about them being released?
I'm sorry, I'm missing the last part of that question. My ears are all clogged up from the plane, my
Under the
apologies.
president's plan, is that what you're referring to? Under President Obama's plan? The 6,000 releases.
We had a lot of conversation, the chiefs in Chicago around that issue. President appeared in with my successor, Charlie Beck, in D.C. just before the conference began about that issue. It's not 6,000, it's 40 to 50,000. That 6,000 is just the first of 40 to 50,000 that are coming out in the next couple of months. The concern that I voiced in Washington, D.C. is that with the current budget situation, the continuing resolution in Congress, the parole bureau cannot hire more parole officers. So who's going to watch these people when they go out on parole? And that's effectively what's going on. They're going to be out on parole. So at the federal level, that's a concern about who's going to monitor them when they come out. And the issue also being, quite frank with you, about the idea of a lot of people incarcerated on drug charges. Oftentimes, those drug charges are pled down for more serious offenses. So you have to take a look at each and every instance rather than the generality that a lot of people went away because of drug charges. Oftentimes, those charges that they actually served time for were bargained down or pled down for more significant offenses. One of the things that we will certainly watch for is on the federal level and at the state level, as people are coming out of prison, looking to ensure that there's places for them to go, that there is appropriate monitoring, that they're just not being released into the streets. That is the concern. We talked extensively about it in Washington, Chicago. California's a mess with the proposition they have, Props 47. That state is heading for big troubles down the line with how they went about letting people out of their jails. I don't think we have anything of that type happening here. I think it's a more thoughtful process, what we're going through.
Commissioner, given that you have these traffickers finding an available market of purchasers illegally of these guns, and this is happening constantly because of all the cases you keep bringing, is this an indication that the criminals, the traffickers, and the buyers are somehow emboldened what FBI Commissioner Comey said the other day, maybe a throttling back of police?
I don't think so. That the idea in this city, for example, we've had the uptick in murders from last year's historic low. Shootings are down this year. So this year we're trending, as you know, toward the end of the year to probably the lowest amount of documented crime we've had in modern times. So I'll speak to New York City. I'm not seeing an uptick in this type of activity, an uptick in the overall violence levels, just the opposite. And good news is in our case, unlike a lot of my colleagues around the country, we have a lot of resources that are going to be focused on this problem. We have in the academy thousands of new kids that will be coming out before the summer next year. District Attorney Vance, through his efforts on forfeiture funds, that we have a lot of money to focus on the technology that will help us deal with these issues. We are very fortunate in New York at this time in the public safety arena, thanks to the mayor, thanks to the district attorney. We're well funded in terms of resources and personnel to deal with what is already a historic low crime problem.
Let me just add quickly, I think it's important to recognize further the success of the NYPD this year. Gun arrests up 7% this year to date. So what you're seeing here is part of a larger trend. NYPD is doing even more, and it's been extraordinary 20-plus years of progress. But in the specific issues of guns, even while we have really broken national policies that we're fighting against, gun arrests are going up consistently, and that's to the credit of the men and women of the NYPD.
If you don't mind, about 2 weeks ago was a similar news conference in Brooklyn where the NYPD and the Brooklyn DA, they actually followed a guy to Georgia and Pittsburgh. Were these guns already in New York City, or do you know if they were purchasing them from out of town, bringing them in, or were they already in the 5 boroughs when you came on this crew?
Sorry, can you speak to that?
And also the gun that was used to unfortunately kill Officer Hilder, have you found that that gun was
Dean,
stolen?
as to the first part of your question, the guns were purchased here in New York City by the principal defendant in the case and who acted as a broker. So those purchases are local.
Commissioner, I was wondering if you could update us on the hunt for suspects for the initial shooting on East 102nd Street.
We're gonna stick to the top.
And well, then on this, for the district attorney, can you provide us with any update on this gang group that was originally arrested and how many of them were put in diversion, how many of them were actually prosecuted, the associates of Mr. Howard in that initial gang robbery?
John, I'll answer that question, but I want to stay on topic here. We also have a wake to go to.
Take two more of your questions, please, and I'm going to be fighting traffic quite a while getting over there. 1 and 2, please.
Mr. Vance, could you just, give us the range of charges against these defendants?
Sure.
And what's the maximum penalty?
Two of the defendants are charged with Class B violent felonies, as I said, which carry a maximum sentence of 25 years. The other 4 defendants are all charged with other trafficking felonies, and so the lowest felony is a Class E felony, and I believe the maximum is 3 years. But these are all serious charges for serious criminal activity.
Jay, two more.
Two-part question. So just to clarify, Vance, was part of the investigation into how these were originally obtained from whatever state they were purchased, if there was straw purchase involved? I know that they were all bought here and that's what the charges are, but was that part of the investigation?
It is not part of our investigation. There will be a tracing that's going to be done as a result of the conclusion of every one of those cases. They don't get traced in the middle of the investigation because that would alert potentially the purchasers of what's going on. But the ATF and I'm sure the PD in our office will understand where these guns came from and act on that information when we have it.
Okay, and secondly, these defendants now go before Judge McLaughlin. What are you asking for in bail, and do you have shaky confidence in him given the terrible event?
I don't have shaken confidence in Judge McLaughlin at all. I think he's as concerned about public safety in the city of New York as any judge I've seen. So I think he will, I don't know what our bail recommendations are going to be. They vary. One individual has no prior record and others are different. So they will vary depending upon the ties to the community. But what I would say in response to that good question is what would help us in these cases if we were to introduce risk assessment tools in the bail process whereby defendants could be evaluated both from a scientific statistical perspective about the likelihood of future dangerousness and the likelihood to offend while they're out, if they are out on bail. That would aid the judges, the prosecutors, to make sure that their recommendations were as informed as they could be. And risk assessment tools are used in more than 20 states around the country and have proven successful and are welcomed by both prosecutors and the court.
One more here, and then Ozzy, and then we have the break.
Can you tell us, does the use of iron pipelines and drug trafficking increase in recent years that you can tell, and if so, what's the trend?
So I'm not hearing you over the click.
So is the use of the iron pipeline increasing?
As the mayor indicated that we've seen an increase in arrests this year for firearms out in the street. We've had a number of these cases that you've covered over the past year. So the issue remains a significant problem, and the reason it remains a significant problem is the easy and ready availability of huge amounts of firearms, particularly from down south. And our efforts up here, we're trying to deal with it up here, but we have a spigot that's wide open down there. And we don't have a national or local ability to shut that spigot down at the moment.
Last one, Ozzy. For the commissioner, can you identify specific proposals or legislation that you think could actually get passed in a Congress that's controlled by both parties that would help cut off the iron pipeline?
Personally, I have no faith in the Congress of the United States on this issue at all. that they've been beholden to the NRA for most of my career in policing. I don't see any movement away from that stranglehold that the NRA has. However, as the mayor has indicated, we need to still keep trying to chip away. As every time we lose a life, in this case, my mind is very much on the life of the officer we just lost. It still amazes me of the insanity of the United States Congress, that they just don't get it. And I don't know why they don't get it, other than that they're basically constantly down there with their hands out to the NRA looking for more and more money. And it's just insanity. So I applaud the President's continued effort. I certainly applaud the efforts of some Congress people, and we're fortunate in the state of New York that we have many of our Congress people who are not beholden to the NRA, who continue this fight. Certainly this mayor, and I think all of our district attorneys are going to continue their efforts to try and move the ball down the court. But with this Congress, that I wish I could be more optimistic, but there's not much to be optimistic about in the U.S. Congress, is there?
Thank you
Yeah.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.